welcome to Reviews of Late with me, Nighthill. So today we're going to take a step back and look at just the general overview of one particular expansion or set, which today is going to be Ice Age. Ice Age was the very first set of cards in Magic that I actually got to see in person. The very first card I saw, and I looked at it and I was like, whoa, where do you get these? I need to have these. It was actually a vanilla creature, ho-hum, but I loved the art and just the overall flavor of it was our Scaled Worm. Just seeing Scaled Worm and then a bunch of other cards. I was in orchestra class playing the violin and the bass player was standing there going through all of his cards. And that was like the first exposure I had to Magic. I looked at those and I'm like, oh, where'd you get them? I have to have them. And then that weekend, I made my dad drive me all the way to Toys R Us just so I could get a couple booster packs and a couple and one starter deck. It wasn't enough to build anything, but that's a different story of Magic, and it was Ice Age. So I'm going to move right along and to do some quick facts about Ice Age when it came out. It came out in June of 1995, so it was a bit after Fallen Empire. A lot of players weren't too happy with that set that came out. That set was overprinted, and then nothing really shook the world of Magic as far as that. But the general reaction of Ice Age was really positive. A lot of people saw it as a fresh look at Magic, which one of the interesting things, Ice Age and Magic in the general, was it was originally meant that each year Magic kind of renews itself. So instead of Magic the Gathering, it would have just been Magic Ice Age. But they ended up scrapping that idea due to, kind of player base of not being, having to restart every year, and then legal reasons. So we're lucky that this all just ends up being all Magic the Gathering. Otherwise, I think it would be a pretty messy situation of having Magic the. But Magic was, Ice Age was actually printed from June of 95 to February of 96. So it had a really big print run. I believe the estimated 500 million is a little low considering how easily and readable buying unopened booster boxes and packs are today for a fairly reasonable price. Ice Age was the 11th set in the 6th expansion. It was meant to be its own standalones, meaning that all the cards you need to be able to play a game of Magic could be pulled from Ice Age. So that's what that was. And then Ice Age was meant to be a lot slower gameplay than the previous ones. That's why you see the dual lands return, but in a much tamer form as the pain lands and then the slow lands. So they really wanted not the super fast high pace that you saw from the beta, alpha and beta, and then unlimited. You see a lot more unique cards and interesting mechanics. A lot of people were unhappy with 4th edition, which had come out just a little bit prior. Due to they took a lot of the powerful cards out, dual lands are gone. So they come back again in a different form in Ice Age. Ice Age was also one of the first. It is the first set to actually have a pre-release event and then a pre-release tournament. It only took place in, I believe, Toronto, Canada. It was like a weekend where they had that gameplay. Ice Age comes out and if you ever see them in the 60 card starter decks, which weren't starter decks at all because it was completely random cards. You couldn't just open a box of the starter box and play it outright, but it was where you got your lands, your snow-covered lands, your commons, uncommons, and then a few rare, and then it came in the 15 card booster packs that we see today. And as far as Ice Age goes as a block, it wasn't originally designed to be a block. You had Ice Age and then Alliance and Homelands, it was Homelands and then Alliance. But Homelands was later removed because it didn't really match the flavor of Ice Age, and it was replaced with Cold Snap. I'll be going into Homelands another time. It was kind of its own mess. So as far as the breakdown of the cards, let's see. Ice Age had 83 cards, which was broken up into 21 rares, 21 uncommon, and then 21 uncommon, And then you had the 20 basic lands, which that also includes the snow-covered lands. You had 45 artifacts, 56 black, 56 green, 56 red, 56 white, 56 blue. Then you had, I think, 33 multicolored cards. Yeah, or no, it was 25 multicolored cards, and then the 33 lands with the dual lands, and then the Columnist, and then Glacial Chasm in there too. So it was a really big set. It's one of the biggest ones the Wizard of the Coast ever produced. It was a pretty widely available. As I said, I got it from Toys R Us. It was one of the, since its print run was so big, it was widely available because previously they kept selling out. So when they uncapped it at Homelands, they ran into a problem of overprinting, so they might have scaled it a little back. And then when they released Ice Age, it wasn't such a big issue because there was a big demand for Ice Age because it was such a solid and standalone set. One thing about Ice Age was it did have about 8% reprints, and then 8% functional reprints, which I'll go into, where those are cards that you saw on previous sets, pretty much Ice Age, 4th edition, and then 2 cards from Fallen Empire. Other than that, they tried to make the cards very distinctly stand apart from the core set of 4th edition and then revised. And in general, they were pretty successful with that. So let's go right into and take a look at those lands. So here we go.
So for our lands in Ice Age, we have our normal basic lands here, as we can see. I really like the art of these. They're pretty nice, very snowy. And in addition to these common type lands, we have another addition to the basic lands, which are our snow-covered lands. So these were an added mechanic that most people feel that wasn't properly implemented into this expansion. As I said, it was kind of a late in development addition. So we have our snow-covered land, which doesn't look very snow-covered at all. We have our snow-covered forest, our snow-covered mountain, our snow-covered plain, and my favorite, our snow-covered islands, with little Easter Island heads there. So those are our basic lands. Moving right along, we have our dual lands, which come in 2 varieties, our pain lands and our slow lands. Our waste here, which you can do white and blue. Our bushlands, which is white and green. And our Carpathian forest, which is our red and green. Our sulfuric springs, which is black and red. And our underground river, which is blue and black. These are pretty nice answer to the dual lands. The dual lands were taken out because it kind of made for too much fast gameplay, whereas this you actually have to take a moment and think about, do you want to do that 1 damage? These cards are reprinted in later sets and are very nice to have if you don't have the option of dual lands like me. And then we're going to move right into our slow lands. So for slow lands, we have our land cap, our lava tubes, our river delta, our timberline ridge, and verdant. These are pretty nice, but the downside is they are slow, so meaning they have the little depletion counters on them. In general, these are quite a bit weaker than our pain lands, but when you're limiting yourself to just Ice Age, they are what they are, because remember, Ice Age was intended to be slower gameplay. Some would argue that Ice Age wound up being a little too slow, but if you really take the time and care with the cards, you can make a pretty quick deck with Ice Age standing alone. So let's talk about those reprints and functional reprints. We're going to start off with a set of cards that was very common in sideboards for white, and then anyone that played in mix with white would be the Circles of Protection. All the colors are present, but one thing that is absent is Circle of Protection artifact. Moving into some more of our white reprints, we have our Death Ward, a Disenchant, and then a card that sees a lot of play to this day and is pretty sought after, our Swords of Plowshares, which is a really nice card to have a lot of flexibility in far as its use. I still use this card quite a bit to this day. Moving into some of our blue, we have our Counterspell, our Power Sink, and our Sleight of Mind. And these are pretty nice cards, useful for anyone that plays blue. For black, we got our Mana Generation with Dark Ritual and then Songs of the Damned. These are nice if you need to pop out some of those pricey demons. And then we have Fear and Howl from Beyond. And in red, we got our Shatter and our Stone Rain. So if you need to get rid of those artifacts and lands, you have that answer. And in green, we got the pump up ability of Giant Growth for just one land. You get those 3/3, really nice. We have Hurricane, we have Lure, and then we have Regeneration, and then a big one that was very useful was Wild Growth, since you need to get a lot of mana out there to get our big bad greenies out there. It's very nice to have. And then for our artifact, a card that was incredibly useful, I rather liked it and the art was rather confusing, was our Icy Manipulator. A really nice card. I liked it a lot. For 4 mana, a little pricey, but it is still pretty good. I liked this card a lot, and it saw a lot of gameplay when Ice Age was part of the tournament circuit. And let's move on to our functional reprints. So we have 2 cards that came out of Fallen Empire, which would be Order of the White Shield, that is a reprint of Order of the Boar, and then Knights of Stormglad, which would be the functional reprint of Order of the Ebon Hand. These are pretty decent. As you can see, they mirror each other. You can temporarily give them first strike, and you can pop them up a little bit. I say the Knights of Stormglad is better because black has that quicker mana generating ability, so you can actually make him kind of nasty when in a pinch. Moving right along here, we have our Zern Spellcaster. Pretty nice card for what it is the reprint of Prodigal Sorcerer. A little pricey, but you can do those 1 damage pops. And he's just kind of a neat guy. So we have our pair coming up here, our Hydroblast and our Pyroblast, which are the reprints of Blue Elemental Blast and Red Elemental Blast. Kind of limited what you can target with these, but if you're playing a versus deck with a friend, these are pretty cool to have. And we have, for green, we have our Fadehorn Elves, which generate green mana, just like our Lana War Elves. For white, we have our Kijoran Warrior with Banning, which is our Bangladesh hero. And for black, we got our Morfiend, which is a Bograth. And then in our Orcish area here, we have our Orcish Cannoneers, which were our Orcish Artillery. And then we have a few vanilla creatures here that don't have any special abilities. Our Tor Giant, which was a Hill Giant. Balduvian Bears, which were Grizzly Bears. And then here's one that I should have said earlier, which is our Juniper Order Druid, where you untap a land. You can play this ability as an interrupt, which was our Ley Druid. So more land control with these green cards, which isn't too bad. Alright, so now we're going to get in the meat and potatoes here. Cards that came out of Ice Age. So these are cards that first appeared in Ice Age, and quite a few of them wound up being reprinted in other editions, but their origins start here. We're going to start off here with Blinking Spirit, which was a pretty popular card back then. It was a 2/2 creature. Strangely, you'd think it would have flying, but it doesn't. It's a card that you can return, creature card that you can return to your hand at any time for no mana, but if you want to recast it, you still got to use that land there. So it did see some of the gameplay, as I said, but it was also a little limited. And then moving into our Seraphim, which is one of the few flyers here and the only angel. This is an interesting card. It was pretty pricey for a 4/4 flyer, but it had that ability of any creature that it buries will return under your control, which is pretty unusual for a white creature. These were reprinted in a few other sets, but I don't believe they're in any current print. Brainstorm, which is a very popular card and very cheap. We see this quite a bit, and it was reprinted a few times. I like this card. It's a good card. Moving into Binding Grasp. This is one of the few cards where you, once again, you get to take control of another creature. It is not really used that much. I like the art on it. It's got dragons beating each other up there. A card that was number 1 back in the day, if you ever read Inquest pretty often, it liked to hover around the number 1 slot. It saw massive amounts of tournament play. Currently, it's not used a lot. I still like it a lot just because I kind of have that I always wanted one. Now I have 4 of them because they're super cheap, is Deflection. So this is a type of spell that I really like, is where you get to kind of do the rubber and glue bouncing off here. And the art's kind of cool. You got Vegeta bouncing off who knows what, maybe a lightning bolt. Moving along into Illusionary Terrain. This was a neat card for switching things up a bit. The art's pretty cool. If you could see the full art of this, it was a pretty nice little painting there. And then we have our Illusions of Grandeur, which is a pretty cool card. Pricey with that 2 commutative upkeep, but it is colorless, where you can temporarily gain the 20 life, and then you lose that 20 life when you can no longer afford it. The art's pretty cool about that, but Bunny's pretty awesome. Moving into black, we have Burnt Offering, where you're sacrificing a creature to get a combination of either red or black mana, which is pretty nice. As we saw earlier in the reprints, black was a big generator of mana, a lot like green, actually more efficient. It's pretty nice. And then we have Demonic Consultation, which is a slightly tamer version of Demonic Tutor. This card was used fairly often in the limited play. Not too bad, the art's pretty neat in it. And then we have Mind Warp, which was a tamer version of Mind Twist. Black cards in black just seem to have the coolest art here. And then moving on, we have a card that was really misunderstood when it first came out. I remember reading in Inquest, this was voted one of the worst cards to come out of Ice Age. And then, of course, to this day, we now know that it's actually the best card to actually come out of Ice Age is our, Necropotence or Necrompotence, whichever way you want to say that. It's a really interesting and complicated card for what it is. I'm going to probably save some discussion about its use for a later time, but it is a really neat card. I only have 1 of them. I wish I had more. And that skeleton is in bad need of a high 5 there because he is a pretty badass card. Another card that saw quite a bit of tournament play back then was Pox. A lot of decks were built around this. Probably another card I will be saving for more discussion at a later time, but it's not bad for those 3. They're pretty much a dark ritual here. We got our Pox. Our red cards, we have some more of our burn spells. So we have our Incinerate, which for an extra colorless land, you do that 3 damage, and then you can't regenerate this turn. So you really burn everything to hell and back. So in that vein of burning, we have our Lava Burst, where you pay what you need to, and you do your X damage to a target creature or player. It is a spell that can't be prevented or redirect damage, and protection on the creatures will not help you. And then we have our card, which is pretty much a table flip in the form of a card, our Dracolopolis, however you want to pronounce that, where you end up burying all artifacts, creatures, and land. So if things are getting out of hand and you have this card, it's a little pricey, but you can clear the field and start, somewhat from anew. And then we have our Orcish Lumberjacks. This is another interesting ability where you're sacrificing a forest to add any combination of green and red to your mana pool. So that's pretty cool. It's a sacrificial dark ritual for red and green there. Yeah, it's not bad. And it's a 1 mana for a creature with this interesting ability. Then we go to Pyroclasm, which is a spell that's pretty interesting and that does 2 damage to each creature. Pretty cheap for what it is. And if you have a lot of pretty light creatures on the floor, you can clear the field with it. Moving into our green, we got our Forgotten Lore, where an opponent chooses to target cards, target card from your library, and you can keep paying green mana to choose it, to change it up until you get the card you want. It's an interesting card for what it is. Nature's Lure, so you get to search your library for a forest and then put it directly into play. And it doesn't count towards your, well, I like how they add all this extra text to your 1 land per limit, and then you get to reshuffle your library afterwards. They actually, in modern cards, really limit the cards that have you shuffling and stuff. And for flavor and in general, this is a really cool looking card, is our Scaled Worm. It's one of our big beasties, really iconic of Ice Age as far as the art goes, where you get your 7/6 creature. Very pricey, but as we saw with our reprints and land generating cards, it isn't unreasonable to get him out onto the field probably at least by mid-game. Or if you're really good with your card control and you're really lucky, you can get him out pretty quick. Moving into our artifacts, we have Jester's Cap and Jester's Mask. These are pretty interesting cards. They saw a lot of gameplay. The more popular one, Jester's Cap, was for a long time the #1 card in Ice Age. I always find the art on him a little strange, but it is pretty cool. So these cards were very popular, and they're still something very interesting to have in your collection. Pit Trap, which isn't much for saying, but there was a limited amount of flying creatures, and if you want to get rid of something, you always have this out on the table. It's not too pricey, and it's not too pricey for the activation cost. And then a card that saw quite a bit of play was our Zuran Orb, which is a free artifact, once again free, where you can sacrifice lands to gain 2 life. I mean, you can't go wrong with free. This was a very popular card. It's pretty neat for what it is. The art's pretty cool on it. I'll probably go into more discussion about this card another time. And then we have our gold cards, or our multicolored cards. We have our Altar of Bone. Pretty nice card where you're looking through your library. Yeah, it's not a bad card. Diabolic Vision is our sorcery here, where you're looking at the top 5 cards of your library and you put one of them into your hand, and then the remaining 3 you put into your library in any order. So it's a little deck control there, and then you also get to put an extra card in your hand. So that's pretty nice if you have a particular strategy in mind. And black back in the day was an incredibly potent and often played combo. Stormbind, this was a pretty popular card also for a red and green deck. So you discard a card at random from your hand, and you get to do 2 damage to a target creature or player. Cantrips cards where you end up drawing a lot of cards. So in general in Ice Age you will have a pretty full hand. So this does make for a pretty useful card as long as you have that little mechanic in the back of your mind. So you're not limiting your hand too much, and you can always do that damage as long as you have the 2 colorless land available to pay for it. And then we have Murkaiki, Rebird It, or however we wish to pronounce that, is another one of our Legends cards where it doesn't untap during its, you can choose not to have it untapped during your tapping phase. You can gain control of a creature as long as she is remaining tapped. If you lose her, you bury the creature also. So this was a neat if you're playing a tricolor deck of white, blue, and black, which actually, looking at the general cards in Ice Age is actually pretty useful. So that's just some of the cards that came out of Ice Age that I liked. As I said, I did leave out some, and others I didn't talk too much about, and I wish to discuss them at a later date in more greater detail. So with that, let's go and have our final thoughts of Ice Age. So there we go.
Alrighty, I just wanted to end the video with some closing thoughts and then some personal opinions about Ice Age in general. As a collector, Ice Age was a very easy set for me to find all the pieces and bring it all together. I found some of the cards, some of the rares I was missing in the store, so I was able to buy like Jester's Cap, Stormglad Matron, and a few others for a pretty reasonable price in store. So I was able to pick out the best that they had, and then I ordered the rest online for a pretty reasonable price. In general, as of 2016, it's not unheard of to be able to build a complete set of Ice Age from anywhere from $40 if you're really good at finding those bargain common and uncommons. Some people try to sell them off for a couple pennies, even up to 10 cents. And then even the the junk rares for maybe 15 cents to 20 cents. It wouldn't be unheard of to spend anywhere up to $86 to be able to complete the set. Currently, the Painlands have been jumping up and down in price quite a bit. When I bought the ones that I was missing, I was able to get them for $1 or $2, but currently they spiked up at $15 and then settled back down around $8. So there is something when you're a collector you need to keep in mind when you're on a budget and you're building certain cards together, what you want to do. So knowing what's rotating in and out of standard can be pretty important. As far as play goes, other than the Painlands, a lot of the cards in Ice Age are showing their age. Like Deflection, for example, which I said earlier, was an incredibly powerful and heavily used card. Today is expensive and obsolete because there are cards with a much lower mana cost that do the same exact thing much more efficiently. So there is that. And I think in general, Ice Age can still be played today very casually when you want a nice slow game, when you're just kind of BSing with buddies and stuff. It has a really nice look to it. I really enjoyed the art. That's what lured me into playing Magic in the first place. And it's definitely something for younger players to maybe want to go back and check out what came before, when the cards that you can buy at Target versus the cards that you can order or go pick up at the game store. It's a really cool set just to be able to go back and read the flavor of. I really like the flavor text in a lot of those cards. And some of the art's like a little wonky, but that's besides the point. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I do plan on making some more about different expansions. If there's a particular expansion you'd like me to take the time to take apart and look at, I'd be more than happy to. One thing I do want to do is every week I'll be releasing 2 to 3 videos where I pick 5 to 10 random cards from my collection and kind of look at the art, expansions, or different versions of that card, and just like general mechanics. I'm not in this to teach anyone strategies or anything like that. There's like a lot more people that are way more qualified to talk about strategy than me. I'm really just trying to present the perspective as a casual player but a fairly serious collector. I really do enjoy playing Magic, and I really, really enjoy collecting the cards. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like, and if you want to see more of my videos, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much.